If you like this podcast, then consider checking out the other great podcasts at metalsharkstudio.blogspot.com. Also consider clicking the donate button while you're there. It would be really cool if you did.
Max level headphones for Earwash Show. Turn up them earbuds for Earwash Show. Gather all your friends around, it's Earwash Show. Cancel all your other plans, it's Earwash Show. Earwash Show. Welcome to the Earwash Show. We are the show who explores the world of podcasting to bring to light shows we find entertaining, worthwhile, and important. Take our views as our own, as your opinions can and probably will be different. And if they are, please contact us at earwashshow@gmail.com to tell us why.
Welcome back, everybody. It's Blake. Welcome back to the Earwash Show. And joining me is Andrew.
Hello, everyone.
How you been, Andrew?
Very well, sir. How have you been doing this week?
I had a horrible scare at work the other day.
Oh, no, what happened?
I was, with the tractor factory where I work, I was cutting some bands off a rack of tractors, and I do that 1,000 times a day, over and over again while I'm listening to podcasts, just mindless activity. And I was cutting them with 10 snips, which, you know, is nothing out of the ordinary. Sitting there cutting them, getting ready to take some tractors off the racks. And I had one of the bands take and pop back and hit me. And from time to time that happens. It's no big deal. You get a little cut, whatnot. I don't know what happened this one time. It's just, I guess, a 1 in a million thing. I had one pop back and hit me, and I looked down at my arm, and like my wrist is just pouring blood out of it.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, oh no, this is bad. And I mean, it's like, you know, a scary amount of blood. And the first thing I thought is, it's cut my wrist. It cut my wrist open. I'm going to die right here at this tractor factory. So I see my boss out walking around. I start hollering for him, and he looks over, and I'm like squeezing my arm. And he comes running over there, and he's like, what happened? And I said, I don't know, the band popped off, and it cut me. He's like, oh my God, that's a lot of blood. So some other guys come running over, and they bring some clean rags and stuff, and I take and wrap the rag around it, and I pull the rag back to look at it. And I guess just all the blood and just the shock of the whole thing, I thought it like cut my wrist on the bottom, but thank God it was on the top.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, but it was a lot of blood.
Was it a deep cut? Because sometimes those flesh wounds can actually bleed more than a deep cut will.
No, it was pretty deep. It was
Oh,
one
yeah?
of those things where, you know, he asked, do you want to go to the hospital? And I was like, no, we got the bleeding stopped now. I'll be fine. It just kind of scared me more than it really hurt me, you know, just seeing all that blood.
Do you need stitches?
In retrospect now, it probably could have got a stitch.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it'll be fine. But
I had
freaked
a,
me out. I thought I was bleeding to death. Freaked me out. I thought that was it. That was the end of Blake.
Well, I'm glad you're not dead at the tractor factory. No one wants to die at the tractor factory.
I know. Right mid.
I think of too many worse places to die.
I know, just mid podcast too. Have my headphones in my ears and.
What were you listening to?
What was I listening to? I think I was listening to Welcome to Night Vale. I think it was during the weather part of Welcome to Night Vale.
You're gonna die during the weather portion of Welcome to Night Vale.
Exactly.
Oh, no. Well, I had a sort of similar experience where I cut myself really badly cleaning out an air filter a couple years ago at work, and I almost passed out when I saw all the blood around everything. The people said I turned ghostly white, and they took me to the hospital to get a couple stitches put in my hand, but the doctor kind of laughed at me when I got there, said, you should have just gotten some super glue and glued yourself shut there. I was like, well, okay. Thanks for your professional opinion, dickwad.
Yeah, that's what they recommended at the tractor factory. Was just, we'll get the bleeding stopped and we'll just glue it shut.
Yeah, but I guess that's why super glue was invented, was during World War II, to sew people shut quickly in the field as a temporary way to, so you didn't have to, stitch people up after they've had their stomachs blown open or whatever.
Right. Oh, man.
That's an uplifting subject to start the show off with. I'm glad you're okay, though. Jeez.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Yeah, it was just a lot of blood for what it was, and just, I guess, the shock of it all just kind of got me more than it actually hurt. Once I went down, went in the office and sat down for a minute in the air conditioning, I was fine, and then the boss kissed my ass the rest of the day, so that was kind of nice. He said,
He let you go home early?
But no, he's like, just, if you want to go back out there, just kind of keep your arm up, up above your heart, and just, relax for a little while, just take it easy. He said, are you doing anything, that has to be done right now? And I said, no, not really. And he said, well, just take it easy the rest of the day. And I said, oh, okay.
Why didn't he send you home?
Well, I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I chose not to go to the hospital when I probably don't necessarily think I needed to, but may have just wanted to, just for maybe his best judgment would have been to go ahead and send me just to make sure it wasn't, life-threatening.
Yeah.
Or that I wouldn't need stitches. So I think with him not wanting me to go, he just kind of kissed my ass the rest of the day, which was a welcome change, so I'll take it. I'll take it.
It's always appreciated when the boss will actually appreciate you for a day.
That's right. Well, hey, it's the top of the show. You want to jump right into it and do the wiretap?
Let's get into the wiretap.
We take suggestions and we listen to your crap. Everybody gather around for the Earwash Wiretap.
The wiretap segment is our listener feedback segment, and this week we have an email communication from Colin Dowdle. He is our buddy who also appears on the Skyrim Addict podcast roundtable with us. And Colin would like to say, hey, Andrew and Blake, when I heard you guys were starting a podcast that was about other podcasts, I just knew I had to throw in my 2 cents worth, or 50p if you're not a colonial, because he's from England and all that. As for the ones I listen to, the selection is quite small, so no need for a 2-parter unlike my A Skyrim Addict podcast updates, because his updates are super long sometimes, but I enjoy them, so don't ever change them, Colin. I listen to all of my podcasts on my iPhone. I have the iTunes app, which I'm pretty sure sucks balls, as sometimes it will not update or download certain podcasts, and the iTunes search engine sucks too, as I had to search on 4 separate occasions to find the Button Smashers podcast because I left off the S, and it didn't give me any results at all. And I found that too, Colin. If you don't spell something exactly correctly in the iTunes search bar, it really just screws you. It's not like the Google search bar that will,
Did
generate.
You mean?
Yeah, exactly. It'll generate things that it can obviously tell what you were trying to type.
Right.
And here's Colin's list. In no particular order, except for the first, is a Skyrim Addict podcast, the Nightcast / Max Level, which is now Max Level permanently. I like the Max Level too.
That's a good show.
Yeah, except for that host. Ugh.
Nah, he's an asshole.
And we've also got Hollywood Babylon on the list, Paper Keg, and Button Smashers.
All right.
And one last one down here at the bottom is Keeg's Quest. I have also listened to Keeg's Quest a little bit too. And I listen to podcasts on the way into work on the train, which depending on the day can take between 30 and 50 minutes or so. An hour-long podcast can do me for 2 days, as I prefer to listen to music on the way home. Cheers, guys. Colin.
Thanks, Colin.
Thanks a lot for writing in, Colin. That's really nice.
I usually resort back to the music when I'm just at a podcast. Then I go back to the same music I've listened to 1,000 times.
What music do you hit up first when your podcast list runs dry?
Usually depends on what kind of mood I'm in, how my day is going at work. We got everything from just hip-hop to rock to heavy rock. That's for the really bad days. Where I'm just mad at the world of the tractor. I'm mad at all the tractors.
When you said a tractor rack, I can't even picture what a tractor rack looks like in my head. Just like a rack full of tractors that need to be unbound somehow, and then I assume with the forklift you move stuff around. I don't even know. I can't even picture in my head what a rack of tractors looks like.
Imagine
your warehouse must be just enormous.
Imagine 4 tractors on one rack. That's how they come from Korea, where we get them. They load them in a shipping container and send them over 4 per rack. So I have to take the top 2 off, then take the lid off. We'll take the actual rack apart to get the bottom 2 out from under it.
Huh, so they're stacked on top of each other. Jeez.
Yeah.
Crazy. I guess they would have found the most efficient way to ship them, though. So
That's right.
That must be the way.
What was it 4, 8, 12 per container that way?
Yeah. So, Blake, I have a question written down here.
Right.
How many shows are you subscribed to? How many different podcasts do you download every week? Because you say you run out of shows to listen to sometimes on Thursday or Friday, and then you have to make up the rest of the space with music. So,
Right.
how many shows are you actually subscribed to?
Well, see, if I run through my list, shows that come out weekly that I know I'll listen to every week. Every day now it's Eric Von Radio, the morning show with Eric Von Haessler. I listen to that every morning. That's the first thing I listen to. So that's every day, at least in a week. That's Monday through Friday. He'll put that show out. And then on Tuesdays, I get the Rooster Teeth podcast and the Giant Bombcast. And I think Savage Love comes out on Tuesdays, too. Monday and Wednesday, I think the 10-minute podcast comes out. This is twice a week, but they are 10-minute podcasts, so it doesn't take long to breeze through those. And then, Mondays, We're Alive comes out, so I'll get that on Mondays.
We're Alive.
That covers Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday is usually pretty dry. And Friday, there's usually not anything. Major Nelson puts out his podcast every once in a while. The Geek Cave is just once a month, unless they do a Skype cast.
Did you mention 40 Go 14?
Oh, 40 Go 14 is weekly. That's right. I think they're Mondays as well. That's right.
Mm-hmm. So do you have a rough estimate of how many shows that is? It sounded about in the 12, maybe 10 to 12
maybe
ballpark.
10. Yeah, 10 to 12 now, I think. It was right at 10 last I counted, but...
And not all those are super regular.
No.
Nice.
Welcome to Night Vale is bi-monthly. There's just 2 of those a month.
I heard that they were denied access to the San Diego Comic-Con this year.
Were they really?
Yeah, they applied for a... I don't know if they're going for just to have a booth, or if they're actually going for a... What are those called? Like a forum where you sign up and people come to listen to you talk.
Oh, like a stage, like a presentation?
Yeah, but I forget what they're called. I'm having a brain fart. But yeah,
A panel?
a panel, there you go, exactly. I heard that they applied for that but were denied, and I just saw this on Twitter today where they said, if you're upset about us not having a panel at this year's SDDC, please contact them directly because we applied to do it and they said no.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I missed that news.
Yeah.
I just have, in my free time, gone back and got completely caught up with Welcome to Night Vale. And a lot of the first episodes, at least halfway through until what they're doing now, they kind of laid out who the characters are in the town. And they're just kind of random stories about the different characters, and now, or little side stories. And now, where I'm at currently, they're kind of starting to tie everything together. So it's getting really interesting now.
Putting a narrative theme to the stories.
Right.
Tying everything together. Cool.
In their last episode, the newest episode, is a live show, which they're doing, live on stage somewhere. It was a 2-part, so I only got the first part of it this week. The cool thing is they're doing this live show, so they've got a live audience. And Cecil, the host of, Night Vale Community Radio, when he walks out on stage, man, you ought to hear this crowd come alive when they know it's Cecil. Because I have no idea what he looked like. I finally had to Google it to see what Cecil looked like, because I hear him, every day, so I want to see what he looked like finally. And it's never what you picture.
Never is.
And but just the crowd reaction once they hear his voice and know it's Cecil. I was insanely jealous. But,
is he a handsome fellow?
Well, no, just jealous because listen how many people like Cecil. Why didn't I think of a show like that? But two, just to hear how many people are into that show is great. So maybe they'll keep it going for a long time. The response was really, really good.
Yeah, you just brought up a phenomenon that actually had questions about the... I mentioned last week that I listened to a Way with Words podcast. It was just an NPR radio show that they rip into a podcast. But I always because I listen to a lot of podcasts, so I always have this picture in my mind of what each podcast host looks like.
Right.
Because for some reason, our natural human condition is to want to put a face with a voice at all times. It's like you always want to picture what a person looks like when you hear their voice. But with radio and podcasting, you never really get that until now that Google Images exist, you can. But I always wanted to write in to A Way with Words because they're, a grammar and language podcast, is to ask them, is there a word for that phenomenon? Just like the picture you get in your head when you hear someone's voice that pops up and you want to imagine what they look like.
Oh, there's gotta be.
There has to be a word for that, but I can never, my limited Google search skills couldn't ever bring up a result. So, but another thing that you were mentioning there that is also another topic that I'd like to talk about a little bit is live podcasting. It seems like
Right.
a lot of podcasts these days, in order to maybe monetize a little bit, is to do a live podcast and charge a few dollars at the door to get people to come in, and that's great. I'm glad that Welcome to Night Vale has jumped on that bandwagon. That's cool that they can make a few shekels that way.
How do you feel about listening to live podcasts? Like if you're listening to your regular, episodes and all of a sudden there's a live one, how do you feel about it just as a listener?
I am A-okay with it 100%. Trying to think off the top of my head how many of my podcasts are usual studio podcasts that then throw in the occasional live episode. There's a few, not a ton, but then there's also some podcasts I listen to that are always live.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I have a couple of those as well. So, I don't mind the live podcast at all. Are you specifically asking about change of format? Do I mind when they throw a curveball at me?
Well, kinda. Well, at least with Major Nelson, I know when he does his live shows, he's usually at PAX or E3, and he'll record a show. And you could tell there's definitely a quality difference with it being live, and recorded with different equipment, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing he incorporates into it is he'll take questions from the audience. So
Nice.
when he does his live shows, that's one thing I look forward to, is just getting to see what other gamers are getting to ask Major Nelson about the Xbox.
Yeah, that is really cool. I like that aspect of a live show. It's, does he also answer listener emails during his non-live shows, during his regular studio broadcast?
No, he answers no emails at all.
So that's the only opportunity that you get in order to hear his listeners' feedback at all.
Yeah, any reaction he has to what you ask him, that's basically your only chance to get it. Now he is good about, I've seen posts where Major Nelson's been on Reddit, and he's been on, he's replied to people on Twitter. I've never emailed him, so I don't know for a fact that he won't reply to an email. I imagine, he's got shit to do, so he can't reply to everybody, but,
If you had to ballpark his number of listeners, would you say it's in the hundreds of thousands, or tens of thousands, or 1,000, or?
It's got to be in the tens of, maybe hundreds of thousands, because his podcast has been up 5-6 years now.
Mm-hmm.
He's been up, well into the 360, up into the Xbox One, so he's been around for a long time. And he was pretty much, like I said, he's the face of Microsoft. He's the head PR guy. He used to do all the Xbox videos for the 360, so any videos they had that they put out on the console that they were showing features for the console, you saw Major Nelson walking you through it. So he quickly became like the face of Xbox.
And he is still currently one of the major guys over at the Xbox company.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's their Billy Mays. He's their pitch man.
Oh, nice. God, whatever happened to Billy Mays? Oh, wait, he died.
That's a shame. I love Billy Mays. I don't care what it was. I would have bought anything he was fucking selling. I love that energy.
What was your favorite Billy Mays product? The only one I can
OxyClean.
think of, that's the only one I can think of off the top of my head was OxyClean. Or I think there was something you plugged into your phone to make it play over the radio as well. I think he was a pitchman for a product like that at some point.
Did you watch that show
Whatever
he
that was
had?
called.
Pitchman?
I think I saw an episode or two.
Yeah. Poor Billy Mays. He was my favorite.
Yeah. Too bad. R.I.P. Billy Mays.
That's right.
Want to get into the feed?
Let's do the feed.
You can find all the podcasts that you need when you listen to the Earwalk feed.
And the feed segment, we like to talk about a show that we are subscribed to, that we listen to every week, and we just like to bring it up and talk a little bit about it, and hopefully encourage our co-host to listen to the same episode as well, and maybe something we can talk about for the next episode. So what did we have from last week's feed?
I had the Indoor Kids, and we talked about, I don't think Hollywood Babylon was my feed choice, but we talked about it, and I listened to it.
Okay. We also have the Dunk Tank section, so I think your Dunk Tank was Indoor Kids, and the feed was Hollywood Babylon, if I'm not mistaken.
That sounds good.
What did you think of Hollywood Babylon? Did you give it a listen?
I gave it a listen, and Kevin Smith, like you said, some people hate him, some people love him. I like Kevin Smith.
He's a controversial fellow.
And to answer your question, I'll go ahead and tell you this. I'm now a permanent subscriber to Hollywood Babylon.
Great.
That was a good find. That was exactly what I was looking for in a comedy podcast.
Awesome. And that's a live podcast, too, like we were just discussing live versus studio podcast, and that one's live every week.
Exactly. They usually do it in, they're out in Hollywood, aren't they?
Yeah, but they do lots of Southern California areas. They'll go down to Pasadena or, San Diego and stuff like that. They always do an event at the Comic-Con, because Kevin Smith is all over the Comic-Con.
But they do, it was definitely a segmented show. They do a ton of different segments, and I enjoyed every single one of them. The comedy, their sense of humor is pretty crude, which is like my sense of humor. So there's a couple times I really laughed out loud while I was at work instead of just typing it and not doing it. And I really, what's his co-host name? Ralph? Is it Ralph?
Ralph Garman.
Yeah, those two, they work really well together too.
Yeah, he is a host on the Kevin and Bean show on Los Angeles. Their morning drive show on
I love how
K-Rock. K-Rock is the network there.
I love how they'll take their people that are in the audience that have come a long distance to see the show. It's like they go out of their way too to make sure that they, at least acknowledge that they're there. So if they write, I guess they write him before they show up to let them know they're coming, because then he'll read their emails while they're live in the audience.
Yeah, the whole show is just woven in all sorts of listener interaction. It's all over the place with that show. Every segment is basically someone writing in and telling them this, or requesting Ralph to sing this children's song like Arnold Schwarzenegger, or someone else writing in to sing, they do a song called like Hollywood Duets or something like that, where
with Adam West
Adam West and Bane, where Adam West will sing a song and or they'll sing a duet always, but it's always with Bane and Adam West together, which I think is really funny because Adam West wasn't the Batman for Bane, so it just makes that much less sense. But I think it's funny.
Look, if you listen to the last episode of it, the one thing that cracked me up the most was they were doing the scene from Taken where what's his name? Liam Neeson was on the phone. He's giving his speech about when I find you. What does he say? When I find you, I will kill you, or something like that.
Yeah.
But he has to read the entire thing.
I have a set of certain skills.
Exactly. But he does the whole thing as Pee-wee. Would it still be as intimidating if Pee-wee Herman did it? And he does the whole thing in Pee-wee Herman's voice, and I laugh my ass off at that.
Yeah, I like his Pee-wee impression. He does lots of great impressions. That's a fairly new segment of the show, which I really like. Yeah, you were mentioning all their segments. They have probably 8 to 15 different segments depending on the show. And they all have their own little theme song and all that.
Oh yeah. What's Kevin?
Yeah, that's great too.
What's Kevin this week?
If you go into the Kevin segment is, different artists will just will send in their art of drawing Kevin Smith into, a normal movie poster that is, very well known, but they will change it slightly to put Kevin Smith's face on it, and it's always very humorous situations. And the great thing is, they always upload everything onto their website, so the listeners to the podcast who can't see it live in the studio, and I usually listen with that webpage open, so that when they get to that part, I can just open up my phone and pop on and be like, oh, that's the image they're talking about right now. That's really funny.
Yeah, that's the only thing that doesn't transition well to an audio podcast is that one segment.
Yeah, there's lots of not lots, but there are some visual jokes in the show. But if you have your phone on you, you can just pop it open right there and look at what they're talking about. So technology provides a little bit of a forum where you can sort of pull that off.
Right. So we had talked kind of behind the scenes, which I'm going to update the website, the Earwash page, and at the bottom of the page, I'm going to put shows that either we have suggested to each other or a listener has sent in for us to try. And it's something that either one of us didn't know of, or we both didn't know of, and now we're both subscribed to permanently, that would get the 2 ear washes of approval. And I think Hollywood Babylon will be the first one on there.
That'll be great. And it also appeared in Colin's list, who just wrote in this week, so that's perfect. Seems to be a happy little round.
Yeah, I loved it. I'm glad you brought that up, because that was a good listen, and like I said, now I'm subscribed to it, so
I'm very happy to hear that. That's great.
That helped fill more of that free time I got.
Yeah. Well, and their back catalog, even though they do lots of current events, what are happening in Hollywood right now, you can go ahead and pop on their back catalog too and listen to their old shows. They're still funny.
Oh yeah.
Well, for my section of the feed this week, I was listening to Eric Von Radio.
What'd you think?
Is he playing a character, or is that how that guy is at all times?
That's how he was on the radio, and that's how he is now that he's got freedom to be however he wants. He's actually gotten a little, I don't know, more eccentric, but that's him. Yeah.
Well, I enjoyed the show. I'll have to listen to it maybe a couple more times before I decide whether I'll be a normal, everyday subscriber or not.
Right.
Because at this point, I always have some time to fit in new podcasts here and there, but a show that updates every day, that's a lot of dedication for me at this point. So, but I did listen to. I have a few notes here.
Go for it.
Here, for Eric Von Radio. This show is for you if you are into the following subjects: sparklers and coffee, Chick-fil-A biscuits and ice cream cake for his birthday,
check,
homophobic bar talk, horribly insensitive little person talk.
Oh, yeah. That was pretty good, though.
Lots of hipster hate. And Sweetwater 420. I wrote that down. I was like, what is Sweetwater 420? I think it's a kind of beer.
Yes, it's a beer. It's a
local
brew.
To Georgia?
Yeah. It's big in Atlanta.
Made it sound delicious. I kind of want to try it.
No, I haven't tried it yet either.
And they had a really funny Predator 2 segment.
Oh, with his son?
They watched Predator 2 with his kid. And the quote I wrote down was, Predator 2 is the encyclopedia of movie cliches, which I thought. He said it was just loaded with movies. I haven't seen Predator 2 probably since it came out.
Yeah, me either.
He had a really nice conversation about Danny Glover's teeth. Also, Gary Busey pre-motorcycle accident versus post-motorcycle accident. Evidently, Gary Busey was in the Buddy Holly story, which I just noticed is on streaming Netflix. So I popped that in my my Netflix queue because I was wanting to check out Gary Busey pre-motorcycle accident.
I didn't even know he had a motorcycle accident until they brought it up on the show, and then I thought, well, that explains a lot.
Yeah, Gary Busey's a nut bar now.
Yeah, he is.
But also, he ended the show with a sort of a state of corporate radio kind of discussion, and he brought up a lot of really cool things in the show there about corporate radio and how they've gotten so watered down by Clearwater and all these horrible things that radio stations cannot be creative at all anymore. They just have to follow the base of what every other radio station does because it's so money driven now that a corporation, I don't know, it was just maddening about he did a really good job of explaining how maddening the whole scenario is about corporate radio not being able to take chances, not being able to be creative and all that. And woven into that same discussion, he was talking about not depending on other people to get where you need to get in life, and picking yourself up by your own bootstraps, and figuring out what your specific skill in life is and do that better than anyone else, and then no one can fire you from whatever job that you have if you make yourself indispensable, basically.
Right.
And I agree with a lot of that stuff. I mean, I never like to get into politics, but I'm as liberal as they come, but at the same time I still don't like handouts. So I like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and taking care of yourself. And I agreed with a lot of the stuff he was saying. But at the same time, since I'm, so super liberal, it kind of hit my ears hard when he was making fun of little people, and he just really, it seems like he doesn't like gay people at all.
Well,
the part of going to the gay bar, that whole conversation was hilarious. His co-hosts are so funny. I love his co-hosts. People, I don't know if they're there regularly or are the same people there every show, or does he have like a rotating staff?
Yeah, Michael and Greg are there every episode. Sometimes Michael Albanese is a comedian, so sometimes he's on the road, but he'll Skype in.
Uh-huh.
And Greg, he's usually runs the soundboard and stuff when he's there. And one thing that makes me jealous is he'll Skype in too from New York sometimes, and their Skype calls are always so clear. It just makes me jealous.
I think they have Super Skype.
I think so.
No, but those two guys,
both,
those two guys are
fixtures.
great. I love those guys. The Eric was maybe a little harsh for me, but I think it's just because I wasn't used to him yet. You know what I mean? I need to give him a few more listens. And then I might be a regular subscriber as well, but I'll have to give it a few more episodes.
Yeah, coming out daily is quite a commitment, especially with a full list that you've already got.
Yeah.
And, Eric Von Haessler is somebody I followed on the radio for years anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And already liked him. So hearing just anything else, I was wanting to hear more of Eric Von Haessler. When I found his show, I was thrilled. So
now, growing up in Indiana, that would be like me listening to if Bob and Tom had like their own spin-off show that I would listen to. You guys probably aren't aware of Bob and Tom down in Georgia, are you?
I've heard of them.
Oh yeah?
I think they're on syndicated radio. I've heard their show.
They might be, yeah.
Maybe out of Chattanooga or somewhere before.
Yeah.
Somewhere in Tennessee. I picked it up at one time.
Cool.
So it's on the maybe list?
It's on the maybe list, but it's, a probable maybe, if that category exists.
All right.
I might download it every day to be supportive so he can get the numbers, but maybe just listen 2 or 3 times a week as I have time or space. You know what I mean?
Right. I will mention this last week, I can't remember what day specifically it was, but he went into, and I found it fascinating, he never really spoke about, I knew he got fired from his job or was let go. He couldn't really say anything about it until his contract was up. And his contract finally ran out, and he spilled the beans on what happened that day at the radio station. So it was finally good to see. I had some ideas that his co-hosts were kind of assholes. You could tell it on the show. But to finally hear him say it, and maybe it was just, I don't know, that he was my favorite on the show anyway. Maybe I was choosing sides anyway. But to hear him talk about it and just air out all the dirty laundry was kind of closure almost, to know that I don't need to go back to listen to the radio show he was on anymore. And just listen to him now.
That's really awesome. I remember having a very similar experience when I was listening to the Adam Carolla show back in the day. Like, he also was under contract for the rest of the year or 2 years or something, so for a long time you couldn't even really hear what happened or his opinions on it because he wasn't allowed to talk about it legally, or else they could sue him and take back his salary from that year.
Right.
So, I totally hear that scenario. It's great to be able to hear that sort of thing and their personal views on it and get some closure on the whole scenario. Well, what do you have for the feed this week, sir?
The feed this week, we had a discussion with Keith on the Facebook page, who gave us some ideas of some of the shows that he listens to. One of them really stuck out because it's one that I'm subscribed to, and that's We're Alive, the story of survival.
Could you explain We're Alive a little bit?
It's a post-apocalyptic zombie survival story, and it's the first audio drama that I've ever listened to. Audio drama being that they've got, different characters, different voice actors for each person. They've got full sound effects for everything going on that they're talking about. Everything from walking, you can tell when they're walking across gravel versus walking through mud, rain sound effects, gun sound effects. It's a full production audio show. Each episode is maybe 30 minutes or so, 25 to 30 minutes. And they break a chapter. They'll do one chapter, I think, a month, and they'll break that chapter up into 3 episodes. So I want to talk about it because they're getting ready. I think they have this chapter and then one more, and the show's finished. And it's been going on, I want to say, 3 years now. And I've listened to...
Might be longer than that. I think it was 2009, maybe, that it started.
Right, yeah. Well, I know there's some shows, they took like a summer off a couple times, and sometimes they'll put 2 weeks in between episodes, which really sucks.
Yeah.
But I've listened to every single episode, and if you like the Walking Dead TV show, then you need to give We're Alive a listen. The first, not even halfway through the first episode, action already starts to happen. Within the first 10 minutes. And then it's, nothing but action from there on out. They got some slower episodes, but every one of them ends on a cliffhanger, just like the Walking Dead TV show. It's nowhere related to the show. None of the characters are the same, anything like that, but the story is also completely different. But I would almost say I like this story better than The Walking Dead. I would rather watch this,
Yeah. It's funny that you bring that up because you were talking about this show, which made me want to check it out. So I actually downloaded the first 3 episodes when I was at work this week. And no, I must have gotten past that because I'm into chapter 2, it says. So probably the first 6 episodes I downloaded. But I listened to them while I was mowing on Friday, and you're right, it's extremely well produced. Like, they are not screwing around. It is very well produced. The voice acting is incredible. Everything is all gears firing in tandem. Like, everything is really good with this show. And it's funny that you mentioned Walking Dead, because when I popped in Skyrim to play some Skyrim today, on my other screen I popped up Walking Dead and just started watching that as well, because I'd never watched Walking Dead either. So I'm halfway through season 2 of Walking Dead now. I've burned through 12 episodes of that.
Oh, nice.
So you've got me on a big zombie kick recently, buddy.
All right. Good.
And I just bought World War Z a couple weeks ago. We had a brief discussion about that as well.
The book?
No, the movie. Sorry.
The movie's terrible, though. Listen to the audiobook.
The audiobook. Oh, man, that's a whole world I need to get into. I've only ever listened to a couple audiobooks.
The book and the movie are... I've heard the movie is good, but the movie and book are nothing like each other.
Have you seen the movie?
I've seen just the trailers for it, and you can tell from the trailers that it's nothing like the book.
Oh, come on. Trailers have nothing to do with the movie that's on the screen. You should know that by now.
Well, that's true, but the book is... The zombie war is over, we survived, and the book is basically, they go around and interview people, and this is their recounts of what happened. And that's the book. And then they have different voice actors in the audiobook describing what they saw, what they did, what happened to them, etc.
That's really cool. Do you have a good source for your audiobooks? Do you just go to Audible, or
that one I got off
from iTunes, or
that one I got off Audible. They'll give you one free download, and that was the one I spent my one free download on because I'd heard a lot about it and wanted to check it out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was worth it. It was worth the free download.
Cool. That's great. So everyone, for this week's feed from Blake, check out We're Alive.
You'll love it.
What's the subtitle? It's Survival something or other.
We're Alive, a story of survival. You can just search for We're Alive.
We're
though,
Alive,
it'll pop
a
up.
zombie story of survival. Web
That's it.
Productions. Very, very well produced. Very good show. My submission, the feed this week, is yet another live show in the vein of Hollywood Babylon. This one is called Doug Loves Movies. And Doug Loves Movies. Doug is a stand-up comedian who loves movies. So he does a live show every week in front of the audience at Largo in Los Angeles. And there is one specific episode that I thought really stood out within the last month. And if you'll jot this down,
All right.
it's from May 18th. And the first main guest is Joey Coco Diaz.
Coco Diaz.
Joey Coco Diaz. And Joey also has his own podcast, and this episode really stood out because of his appearance on the show. But Doug Loves Movies, again, is a movie-themed podcast, recorded live, and it's highly segmented. Again, not nearly as much as Hollywood Babylon, but he does different segments, and basically they're just different games that they play that are built around movies. He has a game called Build a Title, where they will say a movie title, and then using the last syllable of the previous movie, you have to start the next movie with that syllable and just build on piggyback. And it's really hard to explain, but really cool once you understand it. And they
Hard to
also have a
explain,
game.
cool to listen to.
Yes. They also have a game called Last Man Stanton, where they just name a famous director or actor, and you have to just go around the circle and say one movie that they appeared in. And you'd be surprised how hard that gets really quickly. Like everyone has an obvious, 3 or 4 movies, but once you get deep into their credits, it's, it gets pretty difficult sometimes to pull up the names out of nowhere. And the big game that they play every week is called the Leonard Maltin game. And that game is the same rules as Name That Tune, where people go around and say, on Name That Tune, it's like, I can name that tune in 13 notes. And then the next person goes, I can name it in 12 or 11. And the person after that, they name each less. But the Leonard Maltin game is pulled from the Leonard Maltin movie guide. And Leonard Maltin is a movie critic from Los Angeles who, I don't know if he still does, but he used to have a TV show that I used to watch every once in a while. And my father also would buy the Leonard Maltin movie guide every year. I used to love flipping through that when I was a kid. But it's instead of the notes from Name That Tune, they use actors from the cast list, but they go from the bottom up. So the least known actor to the most well-known actor. And if there's 13 names total, and you can say, I can name that tune in 8 names. Or name that movie, sorry. I can name that movie in 8 names. That means you get the bottom 8 names of that cast list, and you have to be able to tell what movie that is. Not from the top people, but from the bottom numbers,
Wow.
So you have to know pretty deep, because if you think about it, how many movies do you know past the top 5 actors or whatever, the top
Hardly
3?
any.
Yeah, exactly. It gets really difficult really fast. So that's a really fun game too. So my submission for the feed this week is Doug Loves Movies. In general, they're all good, but if you want to get into a specific, really funny one, listen to May 18th of this year, 2014, and the lead guest will be Joey Coco Diaz. So that's my submission for the feed this week.
Fantastic.
Are you ready to listen to Michael David's interview?
I love hearing Michael David talk. The man's so stoic.
A very buttery voice, too. So
What
deep and smooth.
What does he look like? I bet
Oh,
he's
man.
dreamy.
I've only actually listened or looked at his Twitter picture or on Facebook. I've never really gotten in to see what he actually looks like.
Me either. We had to creep on his Facebook or something to find out.
We're going to start stalking him now.
We're your biggest fans, Michael.
So everyone get ready for this week's interview segment known as Eargasm.
Our special guest will cause your head to spasm. Sit back and enjoy your new eargasm.
speaking with Michael David. And we know him, of course, from the A Skyrim Addict podcast. That is something Blake and I are very familiar with. It's actually how we met, was because of the Skyrim Addict podcast.
Exactly.
So, Michael David, we'd like to thank you for coming on Earwash.
Thanks for having me.
We just had a few basic questions about podcasting in general. Do you remember the first time you heard the word podcast?
Specifically, no. In general, kind of.
About how long ago would that be?
Oh, God, at least 10 years ago.
Really? You are deep.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, probably about 10 years ago, in the 10-year ago range, I would say.
And do you remember what that was in reference to?
I think I had started taking a train to work for a while. I loaded up a bunch to listen to. Either that or it was during the winter and it was snowy out, so I loaded a bunch up to listen to. I can't remember which. But yeah, it had to be close to 04. God, it might even be a little longer than 10 years. It might be about 11 or 12 years ago.
Oh, wow.
That is amazing. I had
Yeah,
no idea.
because Jay and Jack started 10 years ago, and that was one of the early shows I listened to, the Lost Podcast, but it wasn't the first. So yeah,
The Lost podcast was 10 years ago?
Well, no, their podcast started 9 years ago because they started second season, but Lost was 10 years ago.
I was going to say, I think I started listening to them in the second or third season.
Yeah, they started
their show, which was, the fourth season of Lost, probably. So.
Oh, okay, yeah, they started the second season of Lost, like a couple episodes in or something like that.
Yeah.
So that was like 2005-ish, so it's been a while. And I was listening to other shows. I think one of the first shows I listened to also was 500 by Midnight, which is a Las Vegas podcast that I still listen to.
500 by Midnight?
Yeah. They've been going.
Is that a gambling strategy? What is that?
No, just a basic Las Vegas like travel podcast from two people in Minnesota. It's really good. You know, the people are good. That's why it's good. But they've been going for a long time.
I find that makes the show in general. I find myself listening to things I have absolutely no interest in because the people make it interesting to me. It's like, I'm not a comic book guy, but I've been digging hard on the Paper Keg podcast the last month or two since I discovered it, probably about 2 months ago.
Yeah, it's all about the rapport of the people for me.
Yeah.
Because especially back then, there were no professional podcasts whatsoever. I mean, there just weren't any. That's relatively new. I mean, 3-4 years?
Yeah, I've only been listening to podcasts since probably like 2007, 8 maybe. I guess that's a longish time.
Oh yeah, that's still pretty early. Pretty early on. That's before every comedian in the world had a podcast. Every ball morning radio show had a podcast, and every sports show had a podcast, and every TV show had an official podcast, and 18 unofficial podcasts.
No kidding.
Do you remember what it was that before you knew what a podcast was? Specifically, do you remember what it was that drew you in to get you interested in listening to like spoken word or?
Well, I always listened to talk radio, even growing up. Philadelphia had a pretty good talk radio market, and this is pre-super crazy political talk radio. This was back when talk radio was just random, the randomness, the most random things you can think of during the day.
Right.
There was some really good stations in Philly that had some great talk radio, and I used to listen to a lot of sports and stuff too, and AM radio for those of you who don't know what AM radio is. Carries pretty far, so I get like Toronto stations and listen to like Indians games at night from Cleveland and all kinds of crazy stuff like that as a kid, which is weird, I'm sure, but and listen to like the local talk stations, and usually the nighttime shows were pretty interesting. There was like a guy called what was his name, Bernie Herman, and then there was this other guy, Bernie McCain, and it was like almost just like hanging out in somebody's living room, because there was no like agendas on these shows. They were just guys on the radio talking. Right. It wasn't like what you think of talk radio now. It was quite different. And I guess, God, this had to be mid-'80s to late 80s at the latest.
When did the politics overtake all the AM radio, because there's lots of nut jobs on the AM radio these days.
Yeah, I mean, it slowly changed through the 90s. Around, what, I think because sports talk kind of took over in the mid 90s, that you lost a lot of the other talk radio stations. There's still a few here and there, but mostly it's syndicated stuff at this point. But
yeah, I was also raised on talk radio. My dad would always have it tuned to 700 WLW out of Cincinnati when I was growing up. So it was about half talk and half sports.
yeah,
And I went to high school near Philadelphia, and on clear nights you could pick up my Cincinnati radio station all the way out in Philadelphia.
oh yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I've driven to Florida a bunch of times, and we've picked up WFAN out of New York all the way down in Georgia. So.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, like crazy stuff like that. Yeah, and plus part of it was Philly and New York were like the early adopters of sports radio. I think FAN was the first, and then WIP was pretty much second, and they're the models of what everybody else does. Pretty early on, I was listening to that stuff too, because the stations I was listening to would have a afternoon sports show. But then it transformed into a full sports station probably around 90, 91, something like that. Pretty early on. I mean, other towns didn't have that stuff till much later, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I remember when ESPN became a television station, people were like, sports 24 hours a day, are you joking?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's just not enough sports.
Yeah, now it's a whole world unto itself.
Yeah. Yeah, the late night talk radio was the best because it was the craziest stuff.
Coast to coast AM.
Yeah, I listened to that later on. After that was probably when I was in high school. When I was in grade school, I was listening to WWDB, which was in Philly, which was all talk stations, an all talk station, but it was like local hosts. And it was more of like just what you would think of as like a conversational podcast almost. The people who called in were like friends almost, whereas Coast to Coast was just like straight up entertainment.
Right.
And just insane.
How many podcasts do you think that you are subscribed to at this point, if you had to do a rough estimate?
Not a ton. I mean, relative to I'm sure other people, but probably about 20.
Wow.
Maybe a little more than that.
Yeah, I'm around that ballpark too. I think Blake does a little bit fewer than we do. He concentrates mainly in video games. Do you find yourself with a concentration?
No, I'm pretty spread out. Like pretty much, if I watch a show that I'm really interested in, I'll do one about that. I'll find something good about that. And then I have a bunch that I subscribe to because I'm friends with the people. So
nice.
Yeah.
Can you get into Deadliest Catch a little bit? What happened with that?
No, just time. I did Deadliest Catch podcast with Jamie, and no, it was just a time crunch thing. Just had too much going on. I was remodeling a house last year, and couldn't keep doing it.
Was that the first show that you did? The first podcast you did?
No, it was I don't know, maybe third or fourth.
Okay, so walk us through your podcasting history that you were the host of. What was your first podcast that you were hosting?
I think I did a sports one by myself.
Wow.
For like 10 episodes, a long time ago. That had to be like 5 years ago.
I'd love to hear that. Do you have that archived somewhere?
God only knows. I'm sure it's somewhere on the internet. I don't save anything. Once it's up, it's gone.
That's the storage then. Once it's up on the internet, that becomes the storage.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'll save usually like a couple episodes or something just to be safe, but other than that, it's out. It's gone because you hang on to stuff and it just fills up quick. But yeah, I did like 8 or 9 episodes of that maybe, and not pretty random, just mostly NBA probably.
What year was that about?
It had to be about 5 years ago, I guess. That would be my guess.
So you started about 5 years ago, huh?
Yeah, that would be my guesstimate. I guessed it a bunch of times before that on other people's shows.
Were those friends of yours that had shows, or?
Yeah, yep. I was probably on Media Junkyard 5-6 times. A show that doesn't. Well, Rob, who I do Chatterbox with, was on Media Junkyard. He started that. And
is that still a functioning show?
No. They stopped like 2 years ago.
I've seen posts in the on Facebook in the group for that.
Oh yeah, we used to have some crazy times for sure. It was a very good show, very fun, but it was a lot of work, and people get older. It's hard to do stuff, families, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think after that, I started actually. I think I did something else in between, but I started the Deadliest Catch one and Nonsense Cast, which nobody should ever listen to, at the same time, pretty much.
Well, now I want to listen to it.
No, it's bad. Like, it started off pretty fun. It was an interesting time, and then it's like a great psychological experiment. Like, if you want to, or a sociological one maybe. Like, if you want to listen to, so I did that show with Dez, who does a show with somebody else. Just friends. We're all kind of know each other through the Jay and Jack connections, pretty much through Lost. And so we decided to do a show, and started off great, and it slowly devolved and then rapidly devolved. And I think there was at one point where she wasn't even talking to me while we were recording. So those were interesting shows. It was like listening to a marriage fail.
Oh.
No.
Yeah, except we were just friends, but yeah, it was like listening to a marriage fail, basically, isn't it? It's interesting listen.
But actually, that sort of stuff is what draws viewers these days, at least in television, is just the mess that, interrelationships cause. So that might be really interesting to listen to.
What I heard from people who, listened, and it was hard for some people to keep listening.
No.
It was pretty out there. I mean, it was pretty much anything goes. I mean, we had, porn assignments and all kinds of nonsense going on.
That's really interesting.
That's where I learned a lot about audio issues.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like Blake and I in our beginning phases right now, we have all sorts of issues.
You got nothing. You're not banging pans and stuff in the background. Believe me. If those are still up, oh my God.
Then we'll find them.
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably still up. But I started the Deadliest Catch one with Jamie at the same time. We did 2 seasons. We did a little rewatch too. We kind of started a rewatch one also, where I went back and started from season 1 of Deadliest Catch. Then last season of Deadliest Catch really wasn't that good, and also I was working on the other house, so I just didn't have time. And it was a shame, because right as we got to the point where we were starting to interview some people from the show, is when there was just no time. I couldn't keep up at all. There was just no way.
Right.
And I think right after that, actually, I started Skyrim Addict, because I could just do it whenever the hell I wanted and didn't have to schedule anything or prepare anything or anything like that. So I just kind of threw that together. And, of course, I was doing Chatterbox in the meantime as well. There's really not a lot of preparation, but it's 3 hours every couple weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, when did Chatterbox start?
Sometime after Nonsense Cast devolved into a death spiral. About 6 months after that, because Media Junkyard also ended around the same time, and Rob and I were both kind of looking for something to do. Michaela, who's the other co-host, she had been doing a show as well and kind of faded away from it, and was looking. We were like, we all knew each other from once again the Lost stuff and from going to Comic-Con together and all, and so we were like, all right, let's do something just free and easy where we don't have to really do a lot of work. And it's, Rob takes care of uploading everything. I do the recording and editing, and Michaela does all the scheduling. So everything runs pretty smoothly.
How much effort do you put into editing?
It depends. Actually, last episode it depends on how smoothly it goes. Let's put it that way. I found that we've gotten pretty good at and not having to edit. We've gotten pretty good with the conversation between the three of us. There's some times where it's been a few weeks or we've been away and it's been a month or whatever. It'll get a little rough and I'll breeze through it. I can usually scan through it, see where the big breaks are, things like that, and just clean them up pretty quickly. It usually doesn't take very long. But for the most part, I don't like to edit at all. Yeah, you know what? And it's a personal preference too, because I know a lot of people like a really clean show, but for me, I prefer as conversational as possible. I like just raw shows. That's why I don't really listen to any of the big podcasts that are out now, because that's just not that's not what I started listening to podcasts for. You know, I just prefer the non-professional ones, I guess.
Right.
Too polished.
Yeah, it's just that if I wanted to hear that, I would turn on the radio, and I don't really want to turn on the radio because it's not good.
I can't listen to radio anymore. It's awful.
Yeah, the only things I really listen to is like NPR for some news and stuff, some sports here and there. That's gotten pretty awful as well, but and we have a really good WXPN's a good college station. University of Pennsylvania, they play some great music. So
yeah, I remember that station from high school.
Oh, that station is phenomenal. Still, it's amazing. It's like the only good radio station in the area.
Out of all the podcasts that you're subscribed to, which one, or do you have one that when that new episode is released, all the other podcasts have to wait because you have to listen to that show first?
You know, it's it really depends on the day and what I'm in the mood for, but there's probably like 2 or 3 where when they hit, I listen. Paper Keg's one. Disney Hipsters is one, which is the craziest Disney podcast you'll ever listen to. And Intro to X is probably the other. They're the 3 where and none of them release on the same day, so it's usually they're the 3 during the week that I'm like, bam, right on them, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But everything else kind of falls in right behind it, too, because I have enough time where I listen a lot, so.
Are you allowed to listen during work?
Yeah, well, a lot of times I'm just driving or whatever. I'm in something, so I just either have it plugged into the radio or, you know, have one earphone in.
Yeah, very nice.
One ear on podcasts, one ear on the radio.
Drive you crazy.
Yeah, well, sometimes it gets rough when you're listening for, things that you're supposed to be listening to.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you mean like the boss radio?
No, I mean, I mean, like the tower radio.
Yeah.
The air control tower.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be important, knowing what's going on with that.
You should maybe put 2 ears on that one.
It's pretty loud, believe me. I got to turn it all the way up just in case.
Do people you work with or other people in your family, do they listen to podcasts? Because I know me and Andrew were talking about it. I can't remember if we talked about it on the first show, or I know we've talked about it, you know, behind the scenes, but it almost seems like podcasting is almost like a secret society where not everybody knows about them, but if you usually find somebody that you work with or a family member that listens to shows, then you can kind of talk back and forth about it. Is there anybody you work with or anybody in your family that listens to podcasts as well?
Nah, everybody I work with is mostly older and not technologically savvy, so I would say they don't.
Right.
Family, I don't know. I don't think my brother's a teacher, so he probably doesn't, because he probably doesn't have time during the day. My wife does some. She listens to some shows, depending on, you know, she listens to the Chatterbox to hear what I'm wrong about, and she does listen to. She has other shows she listens to for different things she watches and stuff like that. So.
Does she ever listen to a Skyrim Addict?
No, I doubt it. I doubt that highly.
I just noticed when you set up the Facebook group, besides your wife, I was the first person in there, so I didn't know if she was.
Well, you know why? Because I needed a person. You had to have one other person to set up the group.
Oh, okay.
So she was the default person to set.
You
she was volunteered.
Yeah, she was purposely volunteered.
Andrew, you were the first person in the group?
As far as I know,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
I believe so.
Yeah, I think I started it just about a year ago, a little over a year ago.
Well, I started listening at episode 4 or 5, I believe. So I don't know if you started it as soon as you started the show or like a couple weeks.
Yeah, I pretty much threw it up right there. Like I don't give any lag time. I'd done enough at that point where I wasn't like concerned about the sound of it or anything.
Yeah.
So I was just throwing it up there pretty quickly.
Well, let's talk about a Skyrim Addict a little bit. What gave you the idea for the show?
Well, with the Deadly Sketch podcast going on hiatus at that point, Chatterbox is pretty randomly scheduled, usually every 3 weeks-ish, but it can be longer. I wanted, I play a lot of Skyrim, obviously. I was like, yeah, let me talk about it a little bit, just throw out a podcast out there, because the other shows that were kind of devoted to Skyrim had either ended or were going over to ESO. So I was like, yeah, let me just throw up a gameplay one. I don't want to get too heavy in anything. I'll just talk about what I'm doing, and that's it. And if like 20 people listen, cool.
How many people do listen now?
I don't really like to get into numbers for general public, but it's enough where I'm satisfied with it.
Great.
Good.
That's all you need to be satisfied with there.
Yeah, I mean, really, I would have been satisfied with more than 20, so look at it that way. Because we used to do Deadliest Catch podcast, and we would struggle to break the triple digits, but we were happy doing it, so that's all.
That was an extremely popular show. I'm not sure if it still is, but that used to be.
No, it is, but you know what it is? The people who watch Deadliest Catch aren't necessarily looking for a podcast.
Exactly.
Because a lot of it has to do with the type of show. We did one for a while. I actually started out as a Reality Works and not Deadliest Catch podcast, and we were covering all work-based reality shows.
Okay.
Which
like
at that
jobs
point,
and whatnot.
well, I think we were just doing Chopper, Deadliest Catch, American Restoration had just come on, maybe Pickers, and something else. We had kind of limited it to those, and if somebody was watching something else or whatever, we would talk about that too. And then we finally just said, you know what, there's not enough going on in those shows. We'll just talk about Deadliest Catch because there's usually stuff going on, and it's a much better show than the other shows, quite frankly.
Were you a Phil fan?
I started watching after that, so he was already.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I've actually never even watched that season because we got to a certain point in the rewatch, but it was before he passed. So, so that was interesting during the show because Jamie had a connection to his two kids. Right. And I really couldn't stand either of them.
Oh.
And had no connection to them whatsoever. And I'm like, dude, I'm done with these guys. Like, I don't need to see their mess anymore. And obviously he had the connection from the whole Phil thing that had happened. So.
Right.
That always created an interesting dichotomy. And I'm a little more opinionated than Jamie is.
Well, when you record the Skyrimatic podcast, how do you record? What's your setup to do the show?
Well, for just me, I kick on GarageBand. I have what is this? PV mixer, I think, like a 4-channel mixer. Or no, maybe it's more. Oh no, I'm sorry, it's an 8-channel mixer. Because I picked it up because it was they had it at the local Guitar Center for super cheap because somebody must have returned it or something. I was like, sweet, I'll grab that. It was like $100, I think, and it's probably saved me about 400 hours of editing. So.
Wow.
Especially with the shows I do with other people, because then I can play feedback and the music right on, boom, and I don't have to add it in afterwards or anything. So.
Yeah, that's nice.
You do that via your telephone, is that correct?
Yeah, usually I use my phone for music and stuff. It's just
you
easier.
Just plug it directly into your board?
Yeah, it's a separate device, so it's a little easier to get a handle on, rather than clicking around the screen and accidentally making millions of noises while I'm doing it.
Have you ever put up a donation button on any of your podcast pages or done the Amazon thing where people can click through your page to do, when they go to Amazon to shop or any of that stuff? Have you monetized any of your shows?
Nah, because it doesn't cost me anything, really. The only thing that cost me anything was the mics and the mixer, and that was a one-time hit. And other than that, I use TalkShoe because they're free for hosting. And I've used them since, I've always used them actually, so 5-6 years, and haven't had any issue with it, so.
I was going to just ask, what would be the drawbacks?
Let's see, what is the drawbacks of TalkShoe? There's a file size limit, but it's pretty high. I mean, you got to have a 3-hour-long show to kind of hit it.
Those damn roundtables, they they can
get. They don't. You know what? They don't even hit it. I mean, I hit it once or twice on Nonsense Cast, but I mean, they were crazy long shows.
Wow. That's something we should look into, Blake.
I know it.
Yeah, TalkShoe is pretty awesome for being free. The categories are a little limited, but it is pretty simple to set up also. I mean, I'm sure there's other ones that are free. That just happens to be that people I know used it. guys from 11th Hour Doctor Who podcast, Chris and Joe, I know they use it. Des, who I did Nonsense Cast, was using it for her show What's On with Steph and Des, so which is rest in peace.
Oh, sorry.
Rest in peace. What's On with Steph and Des.
Oh.
You know, I looked at TalkShoe, and to me, maybe I was looking at it wrong, but it looks like you would have like a conversation like live, and people could call in. Maybe.
Yeah, you can do that also. That's generally what it's set up for, but you could just set up a they call it a call or whatever, but set up, the page for your podcast or whatever, and just upload the file. You don't have to schedule a call or anything.
Right, just have it pre-recorded and just
Just
upload it.
Yep, that's all. Yeah, it is more set up for doing a live thing. I think Jack from Jay and Jack does like a sports podcast on there. They talk about football or something. But it's really terrible sound when you record through their live thing. It like sounds like a telephone conversation. So.
Well, how
But
do
you
you
can upload it too. So.
do they give you the options to convert it to like to an RSS feed to send to iTunes?
Yep. Yeah. Everything. I mean, it's really simple to set up too. I mean, it's like it's pretty much step by step. It walks you through it. Submit the, give you an RSS. I mean, they're pretty easy to submit to iTunes anyway.
Right. Yeah, I know we had talked about it, through Facebook messages, and I looked at it and I was like, "What? I don't know what this is. I don't know how to make this a podcast thing."
Yeah, it's really simple. I mean, you could also another way to do it is you get the RSS from that, run it through FeedBurner, and FeedBurner will set up like a Blogspot page for you, basically. The feed will look cleaner anyway when people go to look at it, but
Right.
that's just another way of doing it, and then sending that RSS to iTunes. Just another step, that's all. So I stick with TalkShoe. It's just simple. Simple and free.
Well, when you started as Skyrim Addict, from what it started at to what it is now, did you ever expect that? Like I said, we had talked to kind of behind the scenes about just the community and how popular or active at least the community is. Did you ever expect it to, become what it is now?
No, that was kind of surprising. Like, I mean, I've been in a lot of different podcast communities, or or even like Facebook groups and things like that, and it's hard to keep them active. I mean, it's even ones with even groups with like a couple hundred members, it's hard to keep active. And that is surprising, because I mean, like I said, I would have been happy with a few dozen listeners or whatever. So having like a dozen or two active members in a group is like a double bonus.
Right.
I almost feel like it's easier to have a more active group with just a couple, just a dozen or 20 active people. Just because if you get hundreds of people involved, it becomes so scatterbrained and coming from all directions. But
it is tougher. It is true. Like when you have the larger groups, it does get a little tougher depending on how it's broken down. But generally, you only have a certain percentage of actual active members anyway.
Yeah.
So it's probably only, even if it's 1,000 people in the group, at any given time, maybe 100 are probably active. Mm-hmm. If you're lucky,
Yeah.
You
still
can
out of those 100, you get lots of just out of left field stuff going on.
Yeah, you could. It's all about structure too. I mean, it can get crazy unless you structure it pretty decently.
Yeah.
Or you let in spammers like I did last night to Chatterbox.
Oh no!
Uh-oh.
That's what I get for approving something while I was half asleep. And also, keeping it a closed group helps in that manner because it keeps the spam out.
Yes.
Did you have a problem with that for a while? Because I know it was closed and then opened and then closed again.
No, what I had a problem with was Facebook changing their posting policies, of course. I like to keep things compartmentalized.
Right.
So if I'm posting in the group, I don't want everybody I know seeing it because I don't know, maybe I friended someone and I don't even remember who the hell they are, so I don't necessarily want them seeing what I'm doing or whatever. So I like to keep things compartmentalized.
You gotta hide that addiction.
Yeah,
Skyrim addiction.
I prefer the closed groups for everything. It doesn't even matter what it's about. I just like keeping things like I don't even like mixing my Instagram with my Facebook or my Twitter with my Instagram. I keep all that separate. Each thing I use for a specific purpose, and that's how I like to keep it.
That's pretty cool. I usually just take and jumble it all together.
Yeah, and that's it. Some people like doing it like that. I have different conversations on Twitter than I have on Facebook, and different things on Instagram. So I like having those different venues.
Yeah, I also like to keep my stuff pretty separated. The few times I have posted Skyrim stuff to my the general public of all my friends and everything, I just get made fun of and get called a nerd and stuff. So I like the closed group aspect as well, because if they saw how much I really post about Skyrim and stuff, I would just get ridiculed.
Yeah, I think the only people who mentioned it were dudes I bowl with on during the wintertime. They're like, what the hell's going on with these Skyrim posts? I was like, dude, I know, I gotta close the group.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just some people online. I don't know.
Yeah, they're younger, so they got it at least.
Speaking of control over what happens on the internet here and there, what do you think this whole net neutrality thing that looks like it's coming down the pipeline, how do you think that'll affect podcasts in the future?
I don't know. I'm generally not a hopeful person when it comes to humanity, so I'm going to say they're going to screw it up. So,
what do you think that'll mean? Will they be able to each podcast make them have a certain standards they have to abide by, or how will this play out to
I don't know if it really will affect podcasts, because the amount of data that's going back and forth with a podcast really isn't that much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because the things that's really going to affect are high-end movie streaming and stuff. I don't really see it affecting podcasts in any way, just because of the size of. Maybe if you have some crazy video podcast where you're putting out a movie every week.
Yeah.
But the amount of data that's involved, I don't know. I don't think it would be a big deal.
Great.
Because most people are listening mobily anyway.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah, I think it would take iTunes or Stitcher or one of the big podcast, hosting services to actually have to make some changes before it would affect each individual podcast.
Yeah.
And the amount of data, it can't even be a drop in the bucket compared to what Netflix is rolling with,
Right.
And then as you're talking about getting into even higher definition movies, the amount of data for even a 3-hour podcast is not even what is it, 2 seconds of a movie, maybe, if that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, back 4 years ago when Nonsense Cast started, 3 or 4 years ago, we actually used to crack the top 100 to 150 of comedy podcasts.
Wow.
Ooh.
Constantly. And then as that show went on is when every comedian started coming out. And you would see it slowly creep down, because every comedian plus every radio station started doing it, and I'm like,
yeah. And those charts aren't just the naked numbers. Those are also based on a logarithm with how many new listeners you have each week and all that. There's a bunch of different aspects that take into account for that.
And they don't actually tell you what it is either.
Yeah. So it's hard to get into that whole formula of.
Yeah. Well, it's just hard to crack it now. I mean, to crack any of the charts is really tough now because there's so many. There's just so many out there, And just to get noticed is still difficult.
Yeah. Maybe we're better flying under the radar anyway.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta find a niche basically at this point.
Yeah. That's all we're looking for is a nice little community.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, because I've seen shows blow up like crazy, but it just wouldn't happen anymore like that,
Yeah.
Because there wasn't any other competition, so that was it, Whereas now, a show comes out and there's 15 shows about the show. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's weird. You would think there are some shows where you would think there would be a bunch of shows about them, but there wasn't, or a bunch of casts about them, but there wasn't. Yeah. Like Survivor, there wasn't really any, and some people I know started one called The Tribe, and that like has become pretty big because
Because it
even
wasn't.
though Survivor was like 15 seasons in at that point or whatever, there wasn't any, you know.
Yeah.
The Deadliest Catch one's always available. If you watch Deadliest Catch, give Jamie a call. He'll be right back on it.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
There you go, Blake. Another show for Metal Shark Studio.
There we go.
If I had time, I'd still be recording it. I can't keep up with the show, let alone recording about the show.
Yeah.
You know, with a Skyrim-matic and with Max Level, even having to just take those shows and lump them in the games and hobbies categories on Stitcher and iTunes, it's a fully saturated market.
Oh my God, yeah.
In that category. So to get the numbers that Max Level gets, especially now that I'm some episodes in, I've been pretty pleased with how it's turned out. It's not not number one, not top 10, even top 100 by any means, but just as something I started just for fun.
Mm-hmm.
To see how it's doing now is really just kind of blown my mind,
Yeah, and I think you did a good job of putting it out there too, and I guess networking. I guess that would be the word. I don't know. Just promoting it. I think you guys did a good job with that from the start.
Right. Yeah, I like to get a hold of the Geek Cave, 40 Go 14. I talked to those guys. I met both of them through Reddit on the podcasting subreddit.
Mm-hmm.
And was offering to just trade promos with somebody. Hey, if you'll play the promo for our show, I'd be more than happy to play yours. You swap promos with them, listen to the promos, and then I thought, well, let me listen to these shows to see if I want my promo on these shows. And now I'm subscribed to both of them.
Oh, cool.
They turned out to both be really good shows.
Yeah, I'm terrible with that kind of thing. That's like my weak point by far.
Networking and promoting and advertising and
all that kind of stuff. Because I'm just like, you know what? I'm just gonna roll down to the basement, record for 20 minutes, and
if people listen, good for them.
That's awesome. I mean, I love like talking about other people's stuff and mentioning other people's stuff. Like I love doing that because the community part of it is why I enjoy doing it. But I'm really bad at the promoting it part. As is probably evidenced during the show when I forget, like, probably the email half the time or God knows what else.
Well, you started this, Michael.
Yep. Because I went downstairs and recorded something.
It all started that day you said, I'm going to make a Skyrim podcast, and from there on out.
It grew from a 4-minute podcast to what it's become today. I'm thankful for it. It's my favorite podcast. It's my priority show that whenever it posts, it's the first thing I listen to. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, that's usually what I do too. As soon as a Skyrim-matic. Well, usually Andrew lets me know on the Facebook group that there's a new episode of a Skyrim-matic. And then I'll go and download it. If it's that night, then I'll wait until the next morning and start it on my way to work and check it out. See what Michael's doing.
Another example of my non-promotional skills. When I upload it and don't even tell anybody it's uploaded.
Well, you have an active enough community following you that we let each other know.
Yeah, I usually just throw it up there and then like go to sleep. That's pretty much how it works.
So Andrew will handle it.
Unless it's the morning, then I'm like, all right, let me get this out real fast and go do something.
Yeah. Well, we certainly appreciate it, and also we appreciate you being on the Earwash show tonight, Michael.
Cool, thanks.
That has been a great little talk here. Sorry it went on a little bit longer than we had anticipated, but you're just so darn interesting.
Oh, yeah. Got a lot going on.
That and you're contractually obligated as part of Metal Shark Studios to at least appear on a studio show at least once. So
Exactly.
Well, you've been doing podcasting a lot longer than me, and I assume Blake too. So you're
right.
just you have a lot more of an experience and background with it. So we appreciate you coming on the show and talking about podcasting with us. It's been great.
Cool.
Do you have any shows that you would like to maybe just give a promotion to on your way out the door? A couple of your favorites?
Let's see. Of ones I won't mention ones I already mentioned because that'll be too easy. I'll just say, all right, if you like Buffy and Angel, check out Redemption Cast or Potential Cast. They're the same thing. One's Angel, one's Buffy. And if you like Glee, my friends Josh, Jen, and Ed do a Gleeful podcast. They're good people.
Great. And do you have a Twitter that you would like to promote?
You can, let's see, what's my Twitter? Ren Mike D.
Ren Mike D.
Yeah, I don't talk about Skyrim there, though, generally.
Oh. Doesn't
There
have
is a
to be
Skyrim
Skyrim.
addict Twitter now, yeah. Skyrim
Yeah, there
addict.
is a Skyrim addict Twitter now. Yes, follow a Skyrim addict on Twitter, everyone.
I post on there when I post shows and stuff like that, I think. Maybe some other random Skyrim thoughts. My other account is a little more abrasive.
You have any other questions, Blake?
Oh, that's one last question I want to ask you. Do you go back after you've uploaded a Skyrim Addict? Do you go back and download a Skyrim Addict and listen to it?
I download it just to make sure that it's working.
Right.
Skyrim Addict I don't generally listen to. I listen to the roundtable ones, obviously, because I don't hear what's going on, so I can listen to it and hear what's going on. Once in a while, I'll listen to my own or listen to Chatterbox, like on triple speed, just to make sure, there was no weird glitches in the middle, or, just to kind of hear what's going on and see what can be fixed or whatever.
I caught myself listening to the last episode of Max Level, and during the show, I didn't pick up on it, didn't even think about it while I was talking, but went back and when I listened, I was talking about canceling Xbox Live and how it was $60 a month, when in all actuality it's $60 a year, and I was like, oh, you idiot.
Yeah, if
It's
there's
too
no
late
one
now.
else there, there's no one else to catch that, so.
Now, I heard that and I thought, wow, that's really expensive.
It's
Yeah,
Microsoft.
that's the super gold member.
That's right. They've lost their minds. $60 a month.
Hey, that's more than my internet costs.
Oh man.
See, that's why I canceled it. Jesus, $60 a month. It was killing me.
Yeah, you go broke.
Well, Michael, you might not have known it, but your ears were filthy a little while ago. But now your ears have been washed. Thank you
Nice.
for coming on the Ear Wash Show, sir.
Thanks for having me.
How about that Michael David, huh?
Oh man, such a gentleman, such a dear gentleman.
It was nice to hear, with us both being Skyrim fans as well, getting to hear what he listens to during the day. I think that was my favorite part. And how he got started, to find out it wasn't even with video games. But yet that's what's made him the most popular.
Yeah, definitely. The video game is. I liked hearing his background story of Philadelphia talk radio back in the 80s.
Oh yeah, and if you came here from a Skyrim Addict podcast, if you're a fan of that show, to hear Michael talk about Skyrim, then, well, you were probably walked away pretty sad, but hey, if he's your favorite host, now you know what Michael does and what he did and what he listens to. So, you want to be like Michael? You know what to download now, what to listen to.
Listen to the same Michael shows. He's got plenty of good suggestions.
That's right. Do you want to do some Dunk Tank now?
Hey, you were talking briefly about making that list at the bottom of the webpage. You should
Right.
also, our interview segment, you should collect the shows that he suggested. And
Oh,
any
that's true.
interviews in the future and pop those on there too. That'd be a good call.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes for this episode.
Sounds good.
So after you listen to the show, go back to the website, metalsharkstudios.blogspot.com, look for episode 2 of the Earwash, and you'll see a list of everything Michael recommended. Thank you, Michael.
Oh, thank you, Michael. Would you like to get into the dunk tank?
I got my floaties on. I'm ready now. Let's get in the dunk tank.
You can take these shows right to the bank, a wise investment in the dunk tank.
So moist.
I got my water wings on. I don't want to get my hair wet.
That's right. Trying to keep my head up. Salt water. Yuck.
Yeah, briny. So, what did we have for the dunk tank? If I remember right, you were assigned to listen to the Indoor Kids, if I'm not mistaken. Is that
The
correct?
Indoor Kids. Yes.
With the Jordan Morris episode where they took sort of a retrospective look on video game systems. Oh, okay, what it was, right, is that they had a listener to their podcast, the Indoor Kids, who had never played a video game before and was wondering, where do I start? Where should he start, Blake? What's your opinion?
Well, they were spot on, I think. They didn't recommend just current console games. They took him all the way back and said, if you've never played video games before, here is a list starting basically with the Atari. The games you need to check out for it, and then work your way forward in time.
Did they get into the 70s arcade games, too?
I think they did mention some arcade games, yeah. Yeah, it's been, I think, 2 weeks now since I listened to the episode, but...
Yeah, it's been 3 or 4 for me now.
And they were really spot on with a lot of the stuff they told them. A lot of stuff they recommended were games that, A, I'd forgot about that I did enjoy, or B, were ones that, would have recommended myself anyway. So they were pretty spot on with that.
Do you have a favorite old game from the 80s, from back in the day?
There was one I used to play on the Nintendo when I got it called Excite Bike.
Oh, man, Excite Bike rules.
And I loved Excite Bike because you could design your own track. I remember just sitting there for hours as a kid in front of the TV making my own tracks, running through them and then deleting it all and running them again.
That was the first mod game that I remember, yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah.
You could actually modify the game. That was amazing technology for a 8-bit Nintendo. Is that 8-bit Nintendo? Is that what it was? 4-bit?
Yeah, 8-bit.
8-bit, yeah. Yeah, that was just amazing technology to be able to modify your own track. I loved Excite Bike. That's a great call.
The bane of it was as soon as you turned it off, it was gone. But
yeah,
but being a kid, that was fine. That meant you got to start all over again.
Well, that was sort of the storage issues with Nintendo's why I think a lot of them burnt out early on, because like if I was in the middle of a Contra game, I wouldn't want to turn that stupid thing off. I would just leave it on pause and just leave it on overnight if I had to go to bed, you know what I mean? Just start again in the morning 8 hours later.
That's right.
That's why those things burnt out. People had to leave them on all the time.
But my overall opinion of the show, I like their recommendations. I'm not one to pick on somebody's voices because I'm, no radio DJ myself. But the one thing that drove me absolutely crazy about that show was there are times where me and you'll will get excited and we'll both start talking, but one of us will stop. They just continued to talk over each other just over and over again, and it drove me insane. And I don't know if every episode they do that. Maybe they just had a guest on and they were really eccentric about the games they were talking about, which I understand. I get excited about games on another show. But that just drove me crazy. Just talking over each other.
Yeah, they do a lot of that. I'm not sure if this episode in particular was worse, because Jordan Morris, who is also, a writer and comedian, is also very excitable. And you have to realize that when they're all in the same room together, we try to not talk over each other because we're not sitting in the same room.
Right.
And when you're sitting in one room with other people, it's more like a conversation, and things don't get buried to your ears if you're sitting in the same room with someone and talking to two people at once. Whereas if you're talking online and 3 people start talking at once, it's almost impossible to hear what anyone's saying. So yeah, I do get your point. That is a very good point. Talking over each other is really bad practice. But that will not prevent me from listening to the show. I still enjoy it, and that's one of my weekly shows that I listen to.
Besides Skyrim Addict, is that the only gaming show you listen to?
Yeah, well, no, Max Level.
Oh, yeah, that one. That guy.
And I have The Legend of... I've downloaded a few episodes that I haven't gotten the chance to listen to any yet, but I'm going to give those a shot. Are those mainly video game as well?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Then that will be my third or fourth. Okay.
Well, my overall review as far as Indoor Kids go, there's so many gaming podcasts now that I already listen to, and I'm already trying to cull the herd a little bit, so I don't know if Indoor Kids will be one that I pick up.
Okay. And that's fine. Before you make your final decision, can I suggest one more episode of the Indoor Kids for you to listen to if you have time?
Sure. Oh, there's time.
They have an episode called The Church of Skyrim, where they have Dan Harmon on, who is the creator and producer of that Joel McHale show. What's that show called? I don't even remember what it's called.
Talk Soup?
Yeah. No, that's Joel McHale, yes, but his sitcom on NBC that he was on.
Oh, yeah.
Community.
Community, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, he's the writer, creator, main guy on Community. And Dan Harmon was obsessed with Skyrim. And he is really funny. And so listen to that episode, see if that perks up your ears at all anymore. That would be my only suggestion. And then I don't mind if you leave Indoor Kids in the Dust, because you do have, a good 10 video game podcasts that you're already subscribed to. So I do get it, like you're inundated with video game information already.
Yeah.
But give that specific episode a shot.
All right, will do.
Awesome.
What'd I make you listen to? I can't remember.
You suggested 40 Go 14.
Oh, yeah, those guys.
And I just kind of picked an episode at random. You just told me to listen to the show. So I picked, since at that point was when the new Godzilla movie had just released, and I like the old Godzilla movies from when I was a kid, I went ahead and listened to the Godzilla episode. And I really enjoyed it. I think the guys are really good hosts. They're knowledgeable about, 3 out of the 4 of them are very knowledgeable about Godzilla movies. There's one guy who just kept saying, "I never watched these. I don't know what's happening. Who was that? What was that monster called?" And that also happened to be the guy who had the bad audio quality, like you're hearing now, listeners, on my end through my crappy microphone. So I just thought it was funny that the guy who didn't know anything also had the bad connection online or whatever. So I do enjoy the Godzilla episode. That's still the only one that I've listened to so far, but I see the next one is a Star Trek-based episode.
Yeah, I skipped that one.
And
I like the show,
one
but I
on
skipped that one.
G.I. Joe, fast food, fashion, Sigourney Weaver, wrestling. There's all sorts of things I could listen to. I like that they pick, general sort of categories. Or they have one about Kurt Russell. Ooh la la. Be still my beating heart. Yeah. But I will definitely give them a few more shots. 'Cause I enjoyed the 40 going on 14.
Cool. And I'll say on episode 40, their latest episode, which came out this week.
Origins.
What
is it the origins of?
Them. They never really talked
awesome.
about how they all met and got the idea for the show, so they kind of go into it on episode 40. But something happened with their audio quality, and it got insanely better on episode 40. So I'm hoping it stays that way throughout.
Oh, nice.
It doesn't sound like somebody's calling in through a cell phone anymore. It actually sounds like they're all on higher quality mics, and even over the internet, it was really, really clear and really, really good this time.
I can't wait till I can step up to not having a crappy microphone.
It just takes time. I started with talking in the top of a webcam at the first episodes of the Nightcast, so
That's great.
it just takes time.
Yeah. Well, so I will give my my approval of 40 going on 14, everyone. If you'd like to take a listen to that, please do. And if you need a starting spot and you're into large fire-breathing reptiles, Godzilla is the episode for you.
All right. And that's one you can pick up. You can just scroll through their list, and if you just see something that, tickles your fancy, then, like you said, they go through a variety of topics, and you just pick one out of the bunch.
I'm sorry, we didn't even get into the premise of the show. What can you give just a brief description of what the idea of the show was?
They basically take things like the Godzilla movie when, for example, they take Godzilla movies, the first ones, the Japanese rubber suit Godzillas versus, they'll talk about it, how it got started, did they watch it when they were younger, and then they'll look at, the new Godzilla movie that just came out and kind of compare the two. And they do that with all their shows.
And I started following them on Twitter, and I noticed that they do a cool thing where on this week in 1984, these were the top 6 movies at the movie theater, or whatever. And I just think it's cool that they do a flashback and then compare it to something of today.
Right.
And I don't know, do you follow them on Twitter? Do you even check your Twitter very often?
Nah, I don't fool with Twitter that much. I should, but
they had
I
think it was them, they had a post of the top movies that were released this week in 1984, I think, and it was like 6 amazing movies. I don't even remember what they were at this point, but Ghostbusters was one of them, The Karate Kid was one of them. I don't even remember, but they had just a ton of, I don't know. It's just cool to look back and flash back and think, man, what if today they actually had 6 good movies out at once that I wanted to see? It's never more than 1 or 2, but it was a good week in movies.
Mm-hmm. What do you got for this week?
Oh, for this week is actually a show that I do not regularly listen to, but when a guest comes on that I really like, I will pop it on. But the Joe Rogan Experience, are you familiar with the comedian Joe Rogan?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he was on the news radio show way back in the day, which I used to love that news radio show, so I will listen to his podcast every once in a while. But the one that I would like you to specifically listen to is number 473 with the guest Jim Jeffries. Have you ever heard of Jim Jeffries?
I haven't.
He is an Australian comedian who I just love to death. He's got a TV show on FXX right now called Legit. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but his show's really funny. And he used to do a podcast before he got all bogged down with having his own television show. Boo hoo hoo, I know. But I just love Jim Jeffries, and he's really hilarious. And his show is really good, but I love his podcast appearances. I will search iTunes every once in a while just for the podcast feed of what different episodes of different podcasts Jim Jeffries has appeared in, and I'll try to download as many of those as I can. Because he's a really good guest for some reason. And I enjoy his Joe Rogan Experience number 437 episode. It's really good. Everyone should go check that out if you can.
Awesome.
And what do you got?
This week, I want you to check out the 10-Minute Podcast. I talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the show, but each episode is only 10 minutes. It's the comedian Will Sasso, Brian Callen, and Chris D'Elia. All three. Well, I know Chris D'Elia and Brian Callen do stand-up comedy. I'm not sure what. I know Will Sasso was on Mad TV, and it was in the Three Stooges movie. Has done some other stuff, mostly movie-based.
Mm-hmm.
But he's pretty funny. Each episode being 10 minutes, there's 2 that I want you to listen to.
Okay.
One is called, it came out 2 months ago. It's called Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Love Poet. Because Will Sasso does a pretty good Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation, so check that one out.
Okay, that is from April 1st, 2014, downloading now.
And if you go up, let's see, 3 episodes newer, there's one called TMP, You Got Boyf?
Got Boyf.
That's a pretty good one.
Assuming it means you got a boyfriend.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Yeah, no, I've listened to a couple episodes of the 10-Minute Podcast before, so I will gladly hop right back into that.
Yeah, those are 2 of my favorites, so those are the ones I want you to check out. And it's a small, like I said, it's a small commitment, just 10 minutes each episode. I wish they would do more a week.
As I scroll down, there's another one, Arnold Schwarzenegger, from February 6th. I don't see the actual full title of it, though.
Or if there's any you can find that have Shauna in the title, those are pretty good.
I'm not seeing any now, but I'll make a note for that to look for those, too. Oh, wait, here's a Shauna's Podcast Pilot.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
I'll do better than 2. I'll download 3 of those MFers.
Will Sasso is a pretty talented guy as far as some of the voices he can do, so just check those out.
Great.
But I love it. It's a small commitment, and I wish they would do more of them each week.
Have you already ripped through the whole backlog? There seem to be a lot of these episodes.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've gone through every. I'm looking at my list right now. All my whole list on Podkicker is grayed out for 10-Minute Podcast, where I've listened to everything they've done. And there's A bunch of them.
Great. Well, I will gladly hop on into the 10-minute podcast. Oh, shoot, I just started playing it on accident.
No.
We're going to get sued. You better clip that out.
You didn't hear that. Nobody heard that.
No, nobody. Shh. Quiet. So that is our echo. No, that's not. That is our dunk tank assignment for this week.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good. Would you like to step into the echo chamber, sir?
Let's get into the echo chamber.
You show your Sherman Ray, bouncing down the bank, step into the echo chamber.
Holy shit, that's lots of echoes. Some of these segments are new to the show, so I haven't heard these since I heard them the first time, like at least a month ago, a couple weeks ago at least. Shockingly different than I remember. It's awesome. So the echo chamber, what we really want to do with this segment is to have our listeners do an audio clip for us, record their own voice. You can use your iPhone or whatever phone you have, just do a voice memo, and just call in to say hello and tell us how your day is going and all that. But you should give us a suggestion of a show that Blake and I will both listen to, and then we can just talk a little bit about it on the next episode. And since we haven't gotten a real voice audio memo from anyone yet, we're just going to go back to Colin's email from earlier, and we're going to challenge ourselves to both listen to the most recent episode of the Paper Keg podcast. Have you ever listened to any Paper Keg yet, Blake?
Excuse me, God, I'm choking to death.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, I've listened to one episode of the Paper Keg, and that was back before we even talked about Airwash. That was just back when you were like, "Hey, check this show out," and it was what was the name of that comic book they talked about?
Severed, right?
Severed. Yes, they did such a good job of selling that comic book. Just the story behind it and the artwork.
That's one that I really want to go read. I won't lie, I'm a regular listener to the Paper Keg podcast. I'm not even a comic book guy, really. I do read a couple of comics, but this is a very recent thing to me. Only over the last year or less have I actually read any comic books. But because of this show, I've already gone out to purchase a couple different comic collections, like the big hardback collections of comics that they do. So they sell the hell out of comics, and they really do a great job with the show. I really like the interaction from all the hosts and everything. So we're going to take Colin's suggestion of Paper Keg for this week, and we're going to step into the echo chamber and listen to some Paper Keg. And the most recent episode that they have is not up yet, I guess. Oh, wait, here we go. From Monday, they have one Sin City. I know that they recorded just the other night, so there'll be a new one uploading in the next couple days. So it'll be episode 157, whatever that one is. So we'll go ahead and listen to episode 157, and we will discuss how we felt about episode 157 on the next episode of the Earwash Show.
All right.
And that also works well because do we want to reveal that one of the hosts of the Paper Keg podcast will be our guest for the Eargasm episode, which we will be recording later this week.
I'm excited.
I'm excited too.
We talk comic books.
Talk comic books, talk the history of podcasting, where they found out about podcasting and all that. It's so interesting to hear where everyone heard about it the first time or what other shows that they listened to. I really like talking about that. It'll be fun.
Before we close the show out today, there's one thing I wanted to bring up that I like about doing this show. I think podcasts word of mouth helps podcasts spread tremendously. Because I remember looking here a while back at just Google searching like top podcast of 2013, top podcast of 2012. And a lot of the pages would give me just nothing but pictures, maybe a tiny description. And I would look at it and there be, say, 25 suggestions. These are the top podcasts of 2012 on, so this site says.
Yeah.
But without actually listening to it, how do you know? How do you know if you're going to like it, that it's something you're into? So the one thing I enjoy about this show is you're not just getting just a few words or, written description. You get to hear from somebody else why they like the show. What else are they listening to that they like? And that helps tremendously. Like, I never would have listened to Hollywood Babylon if you wouldn't have brought it up. And now it's, like I said, I love it. I'll continue to listen to it. And that was a good find for me. So that's one thing I like about doing this show. With the love for podcasts, being able to hear other recommendations, word of mouth, basically, that really helps.
Yeah, I'm elated to be doing this show because when I talk about podcasting with anyone, basically, in my life, I just get blank stares in return. So this is really great to be able to find someone else who's also really excited about the world of podcasting, just to bounce ideas off of, get new shows from, and we're hoping to include lots of listener interaction so that they can pitch their shows that they're into that we've never heard of. It's basically just a format for me, being a little my personal agenda here is just for me to collect more podcasts that I can listen to.
Oh yeah, and I definitely need some. Or if you have a podcast and you want us to listen to it, maybe help spread the word to everybody else.
Yes,
by all means, let us know.
Yeah, throw together a little 30-second, audio promo for your show, and we'll be glad to promote any shows that we find, worthwhile and entertaining.
Absolutely. Well, that's my final thought for the night. You ready to close this thing out?
Let's close this thing out. Thank you for listening to The Earwash Show. Please check out metalsharkstudio.blogspot.com for information about Earwash Show and other great podcasts. Please write us at earwashshow@gmail.com if you'd like to send in an email for the wiretap segment or an audio file for the echo chamber segment. Also, check us out at Earwash Show on Twitter and join the Facebook group.
Metal Shark Studio.